Hello, it's Brennan Wissinger, and today I'm going to do part 2 about police brutality and racism. So first off, I want to point out that African American, and I'm going to talk about the policies to try to deal with this, but African Americans are 47% more likely to be killed by police than whites are. Native Americans are even higher. So this is a racial issue. This does have to do with racism. This is a problem. I'll talk to you about it. So some people say we're going to. So why is this? How did this? Why are African Americans more likely? Why police are? I didn't mention. I don't know if I mentioned this in the last episode, which is really stupid to me. But why are police more likely to kill someone? For one, I think it's more because they're afraid of African Americans. I believe it's because they're afraid of them. And what I mean by that is that, okay, let's go back to the 1930s. During the 1930s, there was this policy called redlining, which made areas which limited where African Americans could live. It basically made it where the places where African Americans live poorer. So that means that as we've gotten, it's made them poorer, because of the poverty cycle, poverty perpetuates itself, causes poverty, which causes crime, which causes poverty, which causes poverty, which causes poverty. Poverty perpetuates itself through many different means, and that usually ends up, and that means up to now, these areas have been impoverished. Poverty also causes crime. Poverty causes crime. Crime causes police. I think people, since these communities are more, and since bigger culture thinks African Americans are out to, are the ones that are rebelling gangs and stuff like that. Since we think that way, since these areas are more crime, have more crime in them, police that patrol them are scared of the people that live there. They're scared of African Americans because they're afraid they'll shoot them. And this even goes for more nicer areas, because that is just spread throughout the whole area. So places that are even in better areas have the same problem because of, it's like sort of spread, that ideology that African Americans are going to kill me because they're on a gang or whatever is spread to that point. This would also explain why some African American police in other minorities have also killed black people. No, I gotta plug in my computer. Anyways, so let's go on to policies. First, we're going to talk about schools. So, in schools, you never heard of a school resource officer, the police officer in schools. Well, that's okay, fine, you put a police officer in schools, but they shouldn't be doing disciplinary things. They shouldn't be dealing with detention. They shouldn't be doing things. They shouldn't be called out for a stolen pencil or something. They shouldn't be called out for, unless they shouldn't even be called out for really fights. The only things they should be called out for are stuff that are, significant felonies. Like if you brought a school onto grounds or something. Or, did I say school on the grounds? Gun on the grounds. Did I say school on the grounds? Anyways, ugh, my mind needs to be fixed. Um, um, so they shouldn't be doing that. That should be teachers and principals and stuff like that, not police officers. That's the first thing. We're going to go through a list. That one's from Julia Castro's list. This list comes from campaign 0, and it comes from Julian Castro. So, okay, second, require police officers to live or be recruited from the precinct that they patrol. And what I mean by this is, like, for example, the police officer that killed George Floyd doesn't live in the precinct that he patrols. Many of these don't. I don't even know if I've even heard a case where the police officer that I've known, they've like shown pictures of where they live or said stuff about where they live, lives in the same community. There's been a couple of them, probably not many, that have heard of that. Or they've said the police officer doesn't, like, not like that, but they've said that the police officers, like, I haven't had one with they've said the police officers live in the other communities. And that's the point. Because these communities, they should be two things. They should be representative, and they should be recruited from or live in the area they patrol. Because if they're not there to protect that community. A police officer that lives in the community that they patrol naturally wants to protect the community they patrol. Naturally, they'll be concerned about it. A police officer from outside doesn't really care what happens in that community. It's just a job to them. There's no real importance to them. It's easier to make this not about you. Or easier to make it not about your community if you don't live in the community that you patrol. They should also be representative of the community they patrol. That makes it harder for to say, oh, you're different than me, you know, you're sort of more of a threat. And I mean, I'm not saying, the threat has to come from something has to come from somewhere. But I think that just because African Americans are different than white police officers, because you almost see this, most of the time you see it happen with the white police officers, of course. But then again, these police departments don't usually are very representative. The, when you have I think even like the difference in race makes it more that people that are perceive the threat more because they can't identify with the person they're dealing with. They don't easily identify it, and you think that might be it. Like, I don't think that's true. Well, think about this. I'm guilty of it. Who do you hang out with? Do you hang out with people that are African American, or you hang out with people that are white? If you're white, if you're African American, who do you hang out with? And for example, we were in Upward Bound, which is I was in Upward Bound, which is a program to help low-income students get into college. Well, like, I'm guilty of it because I know that, like, we had no problems with each other, of course. Of course we had no problems with each other. Like, I would talk to people that are African American or Hispanic just as easily as a person that's white. But the thing is, the people I would usually hang out with were white. And the same goes for everybody else. Now, I'm not saying that racism isn't taught. It is taught. But the thing is, it's been taught so discreetly that we don't even notice it. Like, I've noticed, that's the thing. So, and the point is that, yeah, we need to make it so the police relive or are recruited from the precinct that they patrol and are representative of the communities they patrol. So if they're the area is predominantly African American, the police officer patrol that is predominantly African American. If the area is predominantly Hispanic, the police officer patrol that is predominantly Hispanic, and so on and so forth. Require police officers to do 5 hours of positive community interaction in a week in the communities they patrol. Another problem is these police officers don't do many positive interaction. They don't do many community relations stuff. That's a problem. You should be required to do a certain number of hours each week of some type of community service or community interaction that isn't normal police work. That is preferably dealing with children and stuff like that. They try to better the community, because if you're not dealing one-on-one with residents that are not a problem, this will help try to reduce, reduce the saying everybody's a criminal here. That would help reduce that. That would also help bring some, that would help a lot of things. But another thing, require at least 20% of a police force to do foot or bicycle patrols. That's the point of community policing. You're supposed to do a certain amount of foot patrols, because if you're in a car, you're just patrolling around and you never get to talk to anybody. That's one problem. Another thing is, if you're just doing that, you're just wandering around and all that, you're not doing, you're not talking with people. If you do that, you talk with people, you lower the chance of this happening. Like Camden, New Jersey. Camden, New Jersey is was one of the most crime-ridden cities in America, if not the most. They tried to solve it with militarized policing. They tried to solve it with SWAT teams and that type of thing. Well, the mayor decided to get rid of this police force and have another local police force with contract with them if they had to do a certain amount of foot patrols and do community policing. It worked. The crime rate in Camden, New Jersey has gone down. That works, because you're building a relationship with them. And there's also, like, Norway has a policy in their prison system that the prisoners and guards are supposed to make friends with each other. Guess what? Their rates of violence in prison and the recidivism rate is lower. So that's the point. Another thing, require police departments to ask community members about their concerns and have community member meetings. And I'm not saying that I'm getting more. There's more to this. If you're just thinking I'm going to talk about community policing, you're wrong. Require police departments to ask community members about their concerns and have community member meetings. Like, talk about this. Try to work together with the community to try to solve problems. Also, sanctuary cities aren't a bad thing, because if you're an illegal immigrant and your partner is trying to hurt you, you don't want to call the police and then have you deported. That's a problem. And also, there are some valid reasons that illegal immigrants should be in the United States. For one, just human rights. Second, there are areas that Americans don't want to do. Like, for some reason, Americans do not want to well, actually, most Americans don't. I can understand why. Picking lettuce, but picking berries is something different, but then again. But that's the thing that they do, because you can't get Americans to work for that. Specifically, you can't get them to work at lower wages that are compressed. So, that's required of it. There's certain things that they should be able to, there's reasons that this happens. So we should stop doing that. That's not good. That's not right. End policing of minor broken windows offenses. And I also want to say with illegal immigration, there's some extent it's a problem. Like, there is a problem with them taking manufacturing jobs, but it's not as the extent as the people say it is. The main problem is automation. The main problem is jobs overseas. It's not picking, but it's never the main problem. The main problem you're not having a job is never because somebody else is taking it. And that's not going to be solved by kicking people out of the U.S. That didn't solve anything. That just caused human rights abuses. That's just hurting people's ability to gain asylum and try to live here and make a good life and live the American dream, which I'm not even sure if it exists anymore, unfortunately. I hope we can fix that. We need to fix that and make that a reality again. But I'm getting way off topic. So, and broken windows policing. So, there's minor offenses that shouldn't be criminalized, like the consumption of alcohol in streets, marijuana possession, disorderly conduct, trespassing, loitering, disturbing the peace, spitting into the street. I thought that was only something they made illegal in South Korea, because in the country, people do that all the time. It's almost, it's a little annoying, but it's not something you make criminal. Jaywalking, like, who doesn't jaywalk? You know, I am someone that's very rule bound, so I usually don't jaywalk, but most people, including me, have jaywalked in their life. And I've done it right in front of a police car, and I've never been right in front of the police and never had a problem. The fact that people get arrested for jaywalking that's a considerable problem. Bicycling on the sidewalk, yes, that's sort of a problem, but you shouldn't be arrested for it. And here's someone's one ridiculous. Eating on public transportation. Yes, it's a problem in the cities. In the cities, this is a problem. People eat on the subway, and then they get arrested afterwards for eating on the subway. This shouldn't even be a citation thing. This is the thing you tell your child not to do. This is one of the things when you go, well, the government isn't a parent. It's supposed to deal with bigger problems than what parents are supposed to deal with. It's not your mother. You know, if you saw, you know, your government is supposed to deal with things like that you would tell your person you're next to not to do. Or at least what you're supposed to tell them not to do. As I believe. You know, that's what government's for. When things hurt people more. For heck, that could just be cleaned up with a broom. The only thing it does is make someone more work. Anyways, so another thing. In profiling, stop and frisk. So, establish forcible protections against profiling to prevent, and other ones before, I'm not saying making those legal, I'm just saying, stop using them as an excuse to arrest every single person. I'm saying, like, marijuana possession. Yeah, probably marijuana should be legalized for this, because for this reason. Some of these things, like spitting in the street, jaywalking, should be eating on a public transportation should be something you shouldn't even get a citation for. The other things are citation things, and many of them they're citation things, and not arrestable things. I mean, trespassing is a problem if you're doing something like destroying property on it while doing it. I mean, that's a problem if you're outdoors and stuff, but it's not really a problem when you're up in the city or something. Yeah, just give them a citation, fine. You shouldn't arrest somebody with this. But anyways, back to make these, or deprioritize their enforcement. Basically, just deprioritize their enforcement. Okay, back to standpoint profiling, stop and frisk. Establish forcible protections against profiling to prevent police from interviewing civilian lives for no reason other than just the suspicion of being black or other aspects of their identity. These should include immigration status, age, housing status, sexual orientation, gender identity, disability, HIV status, race, religion, natural origin, and as protected groups. yes, this is a problem. This does happen. Because you're African American, you get stopped, and you get you get questioned over this. Yeah, and so and also make it to the right. There's a right to people to seek in court or seek court orders to stop police departments from profiling, and make bans on excuse me, intentional profiling and practices that have a dis, disproportionate impact on protected groups. Ban stops for furtive movements such as um, reaching for wristbands and actions for acting nervous. Like sometimes, like you ever read the hate you give? If you're it's a book that I've read before this, and it's also pretty good. It's really good. I've really read that really quickly. Um, but the whole reason the person gets killed in it, Khalil gets killed in it, the character that dies, by police, is because why he was pulled out of the car and why he went back to the car is because he was acting nervous. So yeah, um, ban stops for just for being in a high crime area. Yeah, that happens. Um, they say you're at 2 a.m. and you're a high crime area. Must be pretty suspicious. Um, ban stops for matching a generalized description of a suspect. You know, if this is, I don't know how much I agree with that one, but to a certain extent, that depends on how general it is. If you're talking about general for, if, you know, if you're being very vague, that's one thing. But just normal description, I don't know if I would agree with that, but, you know, whatever. Require officers to establish objective justification for making a stop and to report every stop, including location, race, gender, and whether force was used and whether a firearm was found. So, you know, if they pull you over, they should have a reason for pulling you over. Or if they stop you, they should have a reason for doing so. And the predictive policing technology, which uses systematic biased data to enhance police profiling of black and people in communities. And you see that they've used technology to try to locate what area the next crimes are gonna happen in. Prohibit then usually then when it's wrong, then someone gets hurt. Prohibit police departments from using resources to investigate, interrogate, detain, attack, or report arrest persons for illegal or for immigration enforcement purposes. Just what I was talking about earlier. Undocumented immigrants shouldn't be, you know, arrested. Like, you know, they shouldn't. We shouldn't be doing that. You know, the police department's job is to protect and serve. If you want to do that, should be the job of that should be the job of ICE, not the police department. The police department has a different mission than they do, and that's a civil thing. And the whole immigration system, I wouldn't even do a whole entire episode on that because it's freaking messed up. It's even more messed up than this. It's terrible. You basically don't have constitutional rights in the system. Let's go back to before the America was even founded, type of thing. This is terrible right here. This is absolutely horrendous too. And I'm not gonna right now. I think we should focus on this, but there's some definite problems. So, prohibit police. So, okay, yeah, just yeah, prohibit police departments from transferring a individual to federal immigration authorities for purposes of immigration enforcement. The same thing here. You know, that's not their job. Prohibit police officers from being placed under supervision of federal agencies and deputized as special federal officers or special federal deputies. I would like to know more research on that point. I'm guessing they mean immigration-wise, but I didn't know federal police could arrest you for immigration crimes. If that's what they mean. Why is it always at night that I get hot? Why can't it be during the day when I don't want to go to sleep? Mental health crises should, yes, I'm doing this at 2 a.m. in the morning. Establish alternative approaches to mental health crises. So, mental health crises should not be excuses, and I say this as someone who has a parent with depression, so, um, mental health crises should not be excuses for heavy-handed police interventions that are best handled by mental health professionals. They should be handled by mental health professionals. So establish mental health response teams to respond to situations, like with social workers, paramedics, that sort of thing. Crisis counselors, that type of thing. To deal with like homelessness, suicides, and other types of problems like that. You know, a lot of times when police use force, it's because it's in during these situations. And so, you know, try to get because doing stuff by force is not going to do it. And, I've seen, like, in, like, each police documentary I've seen, like, that with them deal with suicides, they almost all do it wrong. You know, that's, you talk a person out of being suicidal by trying to just talk to them and just understanding and listening to them and trying to slowly direct them away from from their problem, slowly and gradually working with them to try to move it away from them and try to move it to something that's happier in thought and stuff like that. You don't say you don't that's how you work your way that way. And that might take hours to do. But you just got to go at the pace of the person there. You can't say, you can't argue with a person that's suicidal either. They believe they believe that they're terrible. They believe that they don't want to live. Well, they do. They don't want to live. But they believe that type of thing about themselves. They believe they're worthless. They believe, that they're a problem. They believe that, that type of thing. They believe that they're burdened. And you can't change their mind because they're going to think that, illogically, that you're only doing that because you have to. And that's especially true for someone that's like a social worker or police officer or anybody that would respond to it because that's their job. You know, someone that's done that job would probably even be better handled to deal with this type of thing than even a social worker for that reason. But they should have training in it. And I'm a big supporter in people taking mental health first aid. So, and I'm going to get to what that means for police officers in a minute. So, and this has been implemented in a lot of these things have been implemented in different places. Um, so it should also include involvement of it is a multidisciplinary team in planning and implementation response to crises. So, and it also should include 40 hours of crisis intervention training for police officers. So, all police officers, honestly, I think police officers here's training. The training is 6 months, and it's very military-like. Shouldn't do that. It should be at least a year and a half. Should be. Pennsylvania State Police used to have a policy. They have done stuff wrong. They have done stuff wrong during these things, but I don't know if I've seen them do. I'm not sure if I've seen them do stuff brutal. It's been mostly Philadelphia and Pittsburgh police, But I have seen them not wear name tags and stuff. But then again, there was in Harrisburg. And I don't know what happened, completely everything that happened in Harrisburg. But I think it was Capitol Police there. But at any rate, I don't know. But, there, though I know that state police, though, they probably do. Because almost every police department, every large police department seems to have these brutality problems. So, I don't know why I'm excluding them. So, yeah, I don't know if I've seen any problems with them, but I know they probably exist. So, what was I saying? You know, I forget what I was even saying. You know, they used to require for a while that you would have to go to college. And I'll get more in training in a minute, but that you require that you had to go to college to be in the Pennsylvania State Police. That I think is a good policy. Though if you're doing your training, like for example, Sweden, it requires training of at least a year and a half to be a police, or 2 years and a half to be a police officer. So another thing, require law enforcement agency to obtain written consent for consensual vehicle searches. So that's another thing. Let's make sure that police officers have people's actual consent to do vehicle searches. And I've seen someone that watches police documentaries, yeah, how they just ask, or they do a plain view search, and then sometimes I think, well, that doesn't seem plain view. You know, I mean, there's a problem with that. Yeah. So incentivize local governments to identify alternatives to arrests and offenses that do not threaten public safety by increasing grant eligibility for pre-arrest diversion to appropriate professional service, drug, mental health, housing, education, employment. Yeah, all these things that try to keep people from going and following the crime. That's the root of the problem in the first place. So, we want to remember that. Community oversight. Effective civilian oversight structures. Establish an all-civilian oversight structure with discipline power that includes a police commission and complaints office with the following powers. Determine policy for police department based on community input and expertise. Share policy and policy changes in public accessible formats. Discipline and dismiss officers. Hold public disciplinary hearings. Select candidates for police chief to be hired by the mayor. Evaluate and fire the police chief if needed. Receive full-time competitive salaries from all members. Receive regular training on policing and civil rights. Not have current or former family members of police officers members. Select its members from candidates offered by community organizations. Civilian complaint officers to receive, investigate, and resolve all civilian complaints against police in 120 days. Establish multiple in-person and online ways to submit, view, and discuss complaints. Be immediately notified and required to send an investigator to the scene of a police shooting or in-custody death. Be allowed to interrogate officers for less than 48 hours after an incident where deadly force is used. Assess crime scenes, subpoena witnesses, and file with penalties for non-compliance. Make disciplinary and policy recommendations to the police chief. Compel the police chief to explain why he or she has not followed a recommendation. Have the police commission decide cases where a police chief does not follow recommendations. Issue public quarterly reports analyzing complaints, demographics of complainants, status and findings of investigations and actions taken as a result. Be housed in a separate location from the police department. Be funded at an amount no less than 5% of the police department budget. Have at least one investigator for every 70 police officers or 4 investigators at all times, whichever is greater. Have its own director selected from candidates offered by community organizations. Have not current, former, or family members of police officers on staff, including the director. So basically, create a truly independent police complaints review commission. Something that actually has some force to fire officers, that can investigate officers. They can not. It's just not. It actually has force. It can fire officers. You can fire the police chief. Something that can actually hold officers accountable. You know. Okay, the next one. Remove barriers to reporting police conduct. For I don't know how much this one is, but you should be. Pennsylvania State Police should have badges. For all stopped by a police officer, require police officers to give civilians their name, badge number, and reason for the stop, and a card with instruction for filing a complaint to the civilian oversight structure. So, you know, this is a good thing to put in. It's a good. You should, you know. But I think if someone asked, if they ask, they should be required to do this. And it would probably be good to give their name. They should give their name and maybe even their badge number. This is something they should do. They shouldn't be trying to stop people from reporting it, even accidentally. Limit the use of this is a problem that needs to be stopped. Police brutality is something that needs to be stopped, and this is this is this is this is killing people. This is a problem that needs to be dealt with. Limit the use of force. Establish standards in reporting of police use of deadly force. Authorize deadly force only when there is imminent threat to an officer's life. This is another thing. It's basically the police system is set up so you need a reason, a constitutional or federal law violation of federal law to basic to you know to prosecute the thing. But the only thing is the lines are blurred there. The problem is the lines are blurred there. No one knows exactly what happens because police they do have this special power of using deadly force. They do have that power. So it's unclear where that line lies. And this thing is so right now it's more the use of forces. When an officer perceives that there is a threat to his life, all you have to do is ask the officer, "Do you think there was a threat to your life?" And they say, "Yep." And then basically said, "Oh, case dismissed. Oh, not guilty." That's basically where it is right now. What it should be is the use of force necessary? Not whether the officer perceives a threat on his or her life. So, authorize deadly force only when there's an imminent threat to an officer's life or the life of another person, and such force is strictly unavoidable to protect life as required under international law. Deadly force should be authorized after all reasonable alternatives have been exhausted. Require that an officer's this is something that's in Tennessee. Require that an officer's tactical conduct and decisions leading up to deadly force be considered in judgments of whether such force is necessary. This is something that's in LAPD's use of force policy. So basically, this should be thought out. Require officers to give a verbal warning when possible before using deadly force and give people a reasonable amount of time to comply with that warning. Las Vegas Metro PD policy. So, I'm not talking about if someone's shooting at the police officer when they arrive on scene. That's one thing. But when someone, you think they have something in their hand, but you're not sure what it is, you need to communicate and identify and give them a warning and try to de-escalate. That's what you need to do. before you use deadly force. You just don't go pow, pow, pow. So, require reporting of police killings and serious injuries of civilians. Require the names of both police officers and involved victims be released within 72 hours of a deadly force incident. Those two, one of them's Colorado law and another one's Philadelphia PD policy. So all those things have been implemented in police departments. So, so now here's some more. Revise local police department use of force policies. So, restrict officers from using deadly force unless all reasonable alternatives have been exhausted. Use a minimum amount of force to apprehend a subject, and with specific guidelines for the type of force used and tools authorized for the level of resistance. Utilize de-escalation tactical verbalization, creating distance, time and space, tactical repositioning, whenever, instead of using deadly force. Seattle PD policy. Carry a less than lethal weapon, said Seattle PD policy, which really, that's almost every police department in the U.S. carries a less than lethal weapon. Well, I guess if you're a detective, you might not, so that's something. Ban using force on a person for talking back as a punishment for running away. That is sort of like, what the heck? What? Really? Really? It's a punishment. And for talking back, that shouldn't even exist. And ban chokeholds and strangleholds and hog tying for transporting face down a vehicle. Chokeholds and strangleholds. That's how Eric Garner died. Basically how George Floyd died. There is no technical advantage for you to, if you want to put someone in handcuffs, for you to put a chokehold on them. None. I mean, there's a the only, self-defense that could be, that could work. But you have got other tools. Your job is to get them on the ground and get them in handcuffs. The quickest way to do that is put them on the ground and put them in handcuffs. Not to try to choke them. Also, punching them doesn't make any sense either. What exactly does that solve? Because, that isn't helping. That help isn't helping to restrain them. Not at all. That really isn't helping you. Your job is to just get them in handcuffs. At that point. But no, you're trying to kill the guy. And that's not helping you get him in handcuffs. Not in any sense. Okay, and here's another one. Here's a good one. Intervene to stop other officers who are using excessive force and report them to the supervisor. This is something that needs to be implemented. Because we're seeing so many officers not do that when another officer does it. For example, that guy there, George Floyd. We had 3 other officers standing around. Actually, 2 of them were on top of him, too. I think. 2 of them. The one who got... No, nobody's doing anything. So, okay, here's another one. Have first aid kits and immediately render medical assistance to anyone in police custody who is injured or complains of this injury. I thought this was a standardized thing before I read this. I thought this was just normal. But apparently it's not. I thought this would be something that, that's just so basic. But then again, so is not using force on someone for talking back to you or running away. And so is intervene to stop officers who are using excessive force to report them to a supervisor. So is that just basic. Okay, I'm not even that close to being done. So another thing. Try to remove police funding. Because, we're funding the police and police so much, with this stuff, but we're not fixing the root causes. As I said with Camp New Jersey, then maybe hire more police officers. But they gotta be community-based. You can't just buy all this military equipment and expect it to work. Because, as I said, that doesn't work that way. No, it doesn't work that way. You just don't buy all this military stuff and just deploy it. Let's just make the police more brutal. That'll solve the problem. Let's just try to let's just sledgehammer our way into justice. I think you broke it. I think you broke the scales doing that. You know, let's just hammer our way into justice. Let's just brute force it all the way. Yeah, that doesn't necessarily work. If we want to fix the underlying problems, like the lack of education, lack of good education, I should say, lack of housing, good housing, I should say, and housing in general, um, lack of employment or good employment. That's the problem here. The lack of stuff to make your community, not impoverished. Crime can be solved two different ways. A lot of suburban communities don't fund this much, their police forces this much, because they don't need to. Because they don't have a crime problem. Because there are other things that the other things, everything's working correctly. And they're, you know, getting the community out of poverty will help with this and reduce crime. You don't need to just fund a police force. We're just going to brute our way through it, and it's going to fix the problem. No. It doesn't work that way. End traffic-related police killings and dangerous high-speed chases. Prohibit police officers from shooting at moving vehicles, from moving in front of moving vehicles, high-speed chases of people who have not and are not about to commit a felony. At first I thought, well, some police officers shoot out tires, but, it doesn't make sense. This is all different police officers. You don't know where that vehicle could just swerve and be in your line of fire, and you could kill the driver at that point. You don't know what the driver's going to do. I mean, you're chasing him in the first place. You don't, because he's probably erratic. I mean, you don't know what's going to happen. Moving in front of vehicles, unless you're of a runaway vehicle and you're an officer that wants to put your life that much danger to save somebody's life, that's probably not a good thing. Why would you do that? Do you want to get yourself killed? But, I mean, that's sort of the problem we're in here now, because people are afraid of, police officers are afraid of their lives, for reasons, for fears that aren't necessarily sound. Monitor how police use force and proactively hold officers accountable for excessive force. Report all uses of force to a database with information on all related injuries and demographics of their victims. That's some police departments have implemented that in Indianapolis, for example. Establish an early intervention system to correct officers who use excessive force. These systems have been shown to reduce the number of complaints against officers in the police department by more than 50%. The system should report officers who receive 2 or more complaints in the past month, report officers who have 2 or more use of force incidents or complaints in the last quarter, require officers to attend retraining and monitoring by a immediate supervisor at their first quarterly report, and terminate an officer following multiple reports. Require police officers to notify a state when an officer has been willfully violated department policy or law and committed official misconduct, or resigned under investigation of these offenses. Maintain information in a public database accessible to the public, and prohibit these officers from serving as police officers, teachers, or other governmental employees. Those are Illinois and Connecticut law. Another thing. So, the big problem is we got prosecutors in the system that they're friends with the people that they're prosecuting. When you're doing the district attorneys should not be the ones that do this. Maybe not even state attorney generals. Should be the federal attorney general does this. Because, you know, when the police do misconduct, you don't want someone, don't want their friend prosecuting them. You don't want someone that identifies with them prosecuting them either. So, have the FBI and federal prosecutors, they shall investigate and have authority to prosecute every case of police officer killing African American or any other, you know, some other minority, or just in general, person without them brandishing a weapon or with a police officer violating the use of force procedure as described above as a civil rights case and as a homicide investigation. I should change that from brandishing a weapon because I can just see that being used against itself. And it also, compared to the other thing, sounds, possibly violating, I'm going to put possibly violating the use of force to feature described above. And also, use federal funds to encourage independent investigation and prosecutions. Like pass the Police Training and Independent Review Act of 2015 or use existing federal funds to encourage external independent investigations and prosecution of police killings. Have the state prosecutor's office at state level who shall investigate the power to prosecute, should have the power to prosecute, make arrests, investigate, and subpoena. This is a state prosecutor's office specifically for police misconduct and brutality. Required and authorized to prosecute all cases where police kill, seriously injure a civilian or in custody death, or cases where a civilian alleges criminal conduct against the police officer. And the point being with that, I think that, it was going to require some level of step here because the fact that some of these laws have been passed to try to keep police officers being prosecuted for brutality is a problem. I mean, I think we revere police officers maybe a little too much. Not that that's you're doing your job, fine. You're protecting the community, fine. That's good. We should honor you for that. But the thing is, if we're doing it in a way that is allowing them to call themselves warriors when they're not warriors and they're guardians, when we're doing it in a way that allows them to do brutality like this and not be held accountable, at that point it's not just saying you've done a good job. It's just saying I don't care what job you do. So that needs to be fixed. Equipped with an office and resources to conduct investigations, required by to have its chief prosecutor chosen from a list of candidates offered by community organizations. Require independent investigations of all cases where police kill or seriously injure civilians. Independent prosecutors should be required, and authorized to prosecute all cases where police kill and seriously injure civilian in custody deaths in cases where civilian alleges what I just said with the agency. Required to investigate police chosen at random from a list of the largest 10 agencies in the state, required to report their findings to the public. Ensure law enforcement officers receive high-quality mental health and trauma support services. That's another thing. So, trauma support services following any use of a weapon or a combination with a transparent investigation into those incidents. That's a better thing to put in those laws if you're going to have them. Not anything about which the whole point, it seems, of those laws of law enforcement officers with the Bill of Rights, and most of from what I've seen, is to try to not hold them accountable. This would be something that would be good. That would be something that would be, you know, should be put in there. Something that for police officers, if they, you know, nobody wants, nobody, killing somebody is, killing somebody, for most people, is not, you know, even if, did that, like that, it's not something you want to do. It's not something most police officers want to do, you know, or anybody, if you have a sense of heart when you kill somebody, even if like, enemy, even if you see them as the enemy, you're going to be upset over it. If you're not, there's some problem with you. Like, that police officer that killed George Floyd, from what I see, he's not even upset. That's not, that's not even normal. And he's caused problems like this before. He seems like a psychopath, honestly. Increase the number. Okay, community representation, which I think I already mentioned, but we're going to go some more in detail. Increase the number of police officers who reflect the communities they serve. Require police officers to develop and publicly report a strategy and timeline for achieving a representative portion of police officers who are women and people of color through outreach, recruitment, and changes in departmental practices. And, okay, like, have you ever seen the show? This was on a while ago. This is when I was a kid, and I've tried to watch YouTube clips of it since. Policewoman. It's a police documentary about women police officers, and there's other ones around. Women are better police officers, I think, because they can provide the counseling better. They can provide conflict resolution, which is a big part of their job. Um, you know, they can provide that better, and they're a motherly influence. A lot of them have a motherly influence, which is what they need. And I haven't seen very many, like, ever, like, I've almost never seen them commit, like, on their show, like, if you watch Live PD, you see problems on there all the time. Like, there's a couple black guys went away from some incident they had, and they were walking away, and they just came up to him, and the police officer dragged him up under the car. Like, that's not right. But I've never seen those police officers do. I've seen them do things that, wrestle someone of the guy to the ground and do stuff like that. But I haven't seen them, you know, doing. And look at all these cases that, like, the stuff was. As far as we know, I haven't seen a single one that's female. Actually, I haven't seen one that's the riot police that's female. That I've noticed. I haven't seen a female police officer do any of that. At least that I've noticed. Because they're better at this when it comes to being accountable and stuff like that. You know, they're sort of, they have, like, a motherly feel to them. They're more like a motherly influence, and that's a really good important thing to have a job, because that's really what their job is. I just said earlier that the government's not supposed to, do that motherly influence, but that's what it is. It's a parent, basically. It's a parent for people that cannot, that are, unable to parent themselves. That's basically what it is. That's what government is, basically. It's supposed to help people. It's supposed, it does the job of a parent, but for the entire community. That's basically what a job of a government is. And you might argue with me like that's a problem, but really it's not. Really it's not. It's not just, but it's not supposed to helicopter over you, though. And that was what I was pointing out earlier. You know, there's, if you're doing the level of parenting of an actual parent, there's actually sort of a problem there. You know, my ear. require, so, yeah. And also, more women in the community, so they should have more women police officers, that too, because more women are in the community. And also, I think if you add more women to a police, like when men get together, a lot of men get together. As a male, I can say this. And when a lot of men get in one space, it becomes problematic. Because all of them are starting, it becomes really toxic masculinity when a lot of men get together. When women get involved, the toxic masculinity goes down. Because they start acting, better to some extent. That said, from what women have told me, almost every single one basically said stuff that, if I asked them, just with the amount of cases of sexual harassment and stuff, as a male, I'm offended by my own sex. So, I hope you didn't think I was going to say offended by what they said, what girls say, but, I feel outraged at that. I feel outraged at this police brutality, too. So, of course. Use community feedback to inform police department policies and practice. Require a regular survey to be fielded to community to gauge their experiences and perceptions of the police and use this information to inform better police department policies, police officer evaluations, and police officer pay incentives. So another thing, require all police officers to have body cameras. So here's the policy for that. Require body cameras in addition to dashboard cameras and establish policies governing their use. Record all interactions with subjects that are not. They request that they be kept anonymous. Notifies the subjects they have the option to remain anonymous. Stop recording and storing footage. If they choose this option, subjects' images must be blurred, like if they're released. Allow civilians to review footage of themselves or relatives and request this information be released to the public and stored for at least 2 years. Require body and dash cam footage to be stored externally, and ensure district attorneys and civilian oversight structure have access to the footage. Require police departments and whenever they want to require police departments whenever they want to deny a Freedom of Information Act request for body or dash camera footage to prove in court that the footage constitutes a legitimate Freedom of Information Act exemption. Permanent delete footage after 6 months if this footage hasn't been specifically requested or stored. Include a disciplinary matrix for clearly defining consequences for officers who fail to adhere to the agency's body camera policy. Consider whether cameras and mandated footage are tampered with or unavailable as negative evidentiary factor in administrative and criminal hearings. Prevent officers from reviewing footage of an incident before compiling initial reports, statements, or interviews about an incident. I'm sort of confused about that, but okay. I guess it should be good because they could sway their own views, try to, say, oh, this happened, but because that was their thought of it, but that actually not be what happened. Then again, or they could change their story around and claim something on the paper, but then not actually be what the actual footage is, and that would sort of they could make a better story from the footage. I'm guessing that's the reason why they're saying that, because they should line up, and if they don't line up, there's a problem. Or prohibit the footage from being used in tandem with facial recognition software, or as fillers in photo arrays, or to create a database or a pool of mugshots. Update privacy laws to protect civilians from having video recordings released to the public that do not contain potential evidence in use of force incident, discharge of a weapon, or death. So, here's the training part. So invest in rigorous and sustained training. So, require officers go through at least a year and a half of training. Require the first week to, like, I think, so require that that include de-escalation, crisis intervention training, basic, like, psychology, implicit bias, racial diversity and history, procedural justice, relationship-based policing, community interaction, mediation, conflict resolution, rumor control, appropriate engagement with youth, appropriate engagement with LGBTQ, transgender and gender non-conforming individuals, appropriate engagement with individuals who are English language learners, appropriate engagement with individuals from different religious affiliations, appropriate engagement with individuals who are differently abled, appropriate engagement with individuals of different races. And that's, that. So it should require that they be trained in escalation. That's not required in many places. They're not required to do that. That's a very important thing. We need to know, they need to know how to de-escalate. Because, you see police departments in other places do that. They know how to do that, and they do it regularly. And if it's a white person, they do use it. This isn't going to help you. You don't want to do this to, trying to convince somebody not to, kill them, or trying to convince them not to shoot somebody, stuff like that. And it does work. It's not like you can go look a bit up videos of that actually working, and it does work. So, not saying they shouldn't have their gun pulled at that point, unless, if they feel worthy, they feel that that's a, but they shouldn't be shooting until, they should be de-escalating. That's the point. If they need to put their gun away to de-escalate, they can do that if they feel they should. But they shouldn't be just firing at somebody. They should give them a chance to comply. Give them a chance and try to convince them to comply so they don't, you know, that's what they do in other places. And for-profit policing. So, end police department quotas for tickets and arrest. So, this is just ridiculous. Why are you doing that? Why are you requiring tickets and arrest quotas for, why? How is that helping you? Basically what that's doing is hurting your community relations and everything. It's the only thing that's doing. Well, it's bringing in income, but that's not the point. Especially arrest quotas. If you do a good job, if you don't have any crime, you've done a good job as a police officer, I think. If you don't, you shouldn't have arrest quotas, because if you're in a, you shouldn't, if you have little things to report, you shouldn't be trying to report everything. You should just be trying to focus on the major things. If you come across something small, then handle it as a small thing. Give them a warning and stuff. Give that. Don't do that. Don't go across trying to, with this. Don't. Ban issuing fines or arrest warrants for civilians who fail to appear in court for a traffic citation. So that's another thing. So ban issuing fines and, well, I don't know if, I think this is something that's important to note. But I like the next one, which is Pennsylvania law. Allow judges to discretion to waive fines and fees for low-income people or initiate payment plans. Why isn't this a thing everywhere? As a person from Pennsylvania, I might take this for granted, but why isn't this a thing everywhere? Like, if you can't pay, you can't pay, okay? So you get arrested and then you go to jail. Yeah. you know, and also banning fines for and arrest warrants for civilians who fail to appear in traffic court for traffic violation. That's decent. You know, prohibit courts from ordering individuals on parole or probation to pay pay supervision fees or other correctional fees. Yeah. Prevent police from taking money or property of innocent people. Prevent seizing of property of civilians unless they're convicted of a crime or a state establishes clear and convincing evidence that property is subject to forfeiture in court of law. Keeping any property that has been illegally forfeited is that this property should go to the general fund. Participate and they should participate in a or prohibit police from. Do I have that wrong? I don't think I had that wrong. Prohibit police from participating in the federal equitable sharing program that allows police to engage in civil affid forfeiture. Okay, yeah, they don't have that wrong. So yeah, they don't take We don't do stealing things. Don't take things unless you have a reason to take them. Require police departments to bear the cost of misconduct. Require that cost of misconduct loans be paid out of the police department budget instead of the city's general fund. Restrict police departments from receiving more money from the general fund when they go over budget on lawsuit payments. Here's demilitarization. So end the federal government's 1033 program for providing military weapons to police departments. End the supply of military weapons to local police departments. So establish local restrictions to prevent police departments from purchasing or using military weaponry. So, you know, restrict police departments from using federal grant money from purchasing military equipment or deploying weaponized aircraft, Stingrays. Weaponized aircraft? Really? Weaponized aircraft? That's a thing. Stingray surveillance equipment. Camouflage uniforms and grenade launchers. Using SWAT or restrict police departments from using SWAT teams unless there is a emergency situation or imminent threat to life and high-ranking officers have given approval. So basically, you have to have a high-ranking officer give approval for SWAT teams to be used, and of course, it has to be an imminent threat to life. So yeah, restrict the police from conducting no-knock raids. Yeah, we should completely ban that. Don't. If you're not knocking, I mean, you shouldn't just burst in. You should announce yourself, of course. That's a problem when you don't announce yourself. You know, you know, if the person is not, wants to give up to you, they may think you're trying to kill them. You know, that's, you know, that's making the situation, it's tense. But that's also not helping matters. Accessing federal grant money or purchasing military equipment if the department has been, or restrict police departments from accessing federal grant money or purchasing military equipment if the department has been recently found to demonstrate a pattern or practice of discriminatory policing. So, yeah, don't get military equipment. Police departments should not get military equipment if they're doing something wrong. Certain police departments that U.S. Department deems as over-militarized must return certain pieces of their military equipment as provided by the U.S. Department of Justice. Okay, we finally gotten to the last one, So, remove barriers to effective misconduct investigations and civilian oversights. Remove contract provisions, local policies, and provisions of state Local policies and provisions of state law enforcement officers' bills of rights that allow officers to wait 48 hours before being interrogated after an incident, prevent investigators from pursuing other cases of misconduct revealed during the investigation, prevent an officer's name and picture from being released to the public, prohibit civilians from having the power to discipline, subpoena, or interrogate officers, state that the police chief has the sole authority to discipline officers, enable officers to appeal a disciplinary decision to a hearing board of other police officers, and enable officers to use contract grievance process to have an outside arbitrator to reverse disciplinary decisions and reinstate officers who have committed misconduct, prevent an officer from being investigated for an incident that had happened 100 days or more prior, allow an officer to choose not to take a lie detector test without being punished, and require a civilian who is accusing police officer to pass a lie detector test first, or prevent an officer's test from being considered as evidence of misconduct. Well, never mind. Well, why does this list even no? Why does it even exist? Because why does these laws do these type of things? Like wait 48 hours after an incident interrogated to be, or after an incident has happened to interrogate them? Prevent other following other investigations revealed by it? You know, state that the police chief is the sole authority to discipline officers. Enable officers to appeal a disciplinary decision to a hearing board of police officers. Enable an outside officers to contract out an outside arbitrator to reverse disciplinary decisions. What the hell? Why? Why does that even exist? This is the institutional problem again. This is like the keystone. This is like the icing on the cake. Terrible cake. An evil cake. With police brutality. I'm not saying all police officers are evil, but why is this thing even why is this list even exist? Why is there a police officer bill of rights that includes these things? Are you just trying to make sure they're not, held accountable? I think you might be. It seems like this is the only things that these could do. Another one. Keep officer disciplinary history accessible to police departments and the public. Remove contract positions of local state policies and provisions in state law enforcement bill of rights that allow officers to expunge and destroy records of past misconduct. Again, why? Why can they do that? Prevent their disciplinary records from being released to the public via the Freedom of Information Act. Again, why are they able to do that? Ensure financial accountability for officers and police departments that see. Then here's another one. Ensure financial accountability for officers and police departments that kill or seriously injure civilians. Remove contract provisions, local policies, and provisions that state law enforcement officers' Bill of Rights all require officers to be given paid administrative leave or paid desk duty during investigation following a police shooting or use of deadly force. Prevent officers from receiving unpaid suspensions as discipline for misconduct. Allow officers to use vacation or discretionary time to pay themselves while on suspension. Allow officers to receive paid leave or paid desk duty after being charged with a felony offense. Why do these exist again? Why? Okay, here's some other things. Protests. The U.S. needs to learn how to deal with them. First off, negotiate and de-escalate are great ways to deal with them. Using tear gas is not. And it seems like there's the definitions for what's peaceful and what's violent are not actually that clear. Well, I made a system to figure that out. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 different types of, like, demonstrations and different responses. So I have peaceful. Protest is an assigned area, where it said it would be. Protest doesn't include firearms. And so you just watch over the protest with normal officers. Don't remove it. Peaceful protest type 2. Protest has moved past this assigned area that is not blocking hospitals or fire stations, but may be blocking roads. So you basically just contain them and just watch over them. After 24 hours, normal patrol units in riot gear can arrest one by one the protesters. This is something they used to do. Now they just throw tear gas at them. Before 24 hours, do nothing except keep traffic away. Now they just tear gas them. They used to do this type of thing. Like, Britain is better at it. Britain's better at this, too, with this. I'm not saying Britain is without police brutality, but Britain has more accountability measures and stuff. It has almost one of the lowest rates of police brutality. That said, Britain does have police brutality, instances of police brutality and stuff like that. Every country does. But the problem is just the extent in the U.S. We have more police officers kill people than, wrongfully than officers killed. That's a problem. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't honor police officers when they die, but when they've gotten to this level, when they've gotten to the level that, to this point, that's a problem. Aggressive level, or type 1. A small minority, less than 50% of protesters are actively attacking each other or police, damaging property or looting. A protest has moved past assigned area and there are counter-protesters. Those are the 2 types of scenarios. So, or a protest includes firearms. So, here's the response. Contain the protest, document who's doing it, who snatch, like if there are people with firearms or people that are looting, damaging property, attacking each other or police, snatch them, remove them, snatch them out of the protest, and prepare for larger scale protests. So, aggressive type 2. The protest has moved past its assigned area, and firearms are involved. Protest is blocking entrances of hospitals or fire stations. The response would be, remove them, like, with riot police. If there's firearms, back them up with some type of SWAT police or SWAT teams and mounted police. If they're small, remove them with normal police backed up by riot police. And if there are firearms, back them up by SWAT teams. That's a better policy for that. Riot, a significant minority, more than 25% of protesters are actively attacking police or actively damaging property. Contain, document, identify. So, first off, just contain it. Document what's going on, who's doing what, identify them later and try to arrest them later. Who's doing the damaging, that type of thing. But back off, because at a riot at some point, you know, you know, putting tear gas out there and trying to do all that might do more harm than good. And British police have done this stuff. They know to a certain extent that doing that type of thing, I don't even know if they have tear gas, but they probably do. But doing that would be more harmful than good. So that's something we got to remember here. Riot type 2. So, significant more than minority, um, are, or more than 25%, or or more, and that's the other type 1, or more, majority 2, are actively attacking police and other protesters, or actively damaging property. So basically, response, contain them, document them, identify them, try to get this under control. At this point, since they're attacking each other, since, injury and death could occur, this is a point where the use of tear gas might actually be something point allowed. But when they're just attacking the police, all you have to do is back off, and you won't get hurt. All there are is damaging property. Using a less than lethal, you're using tear gas is something that's prohibited in war. That's something that could hurt somebody. So is rubber bullets. If you use them the wrong way, they could hurt somebody. And in the confusion of that, and in a riot or whatever, that's almost going to happen. So you gotta be... So it might be better just to back off. In this case, since they're hurting each other, you might want to put it down. And the riot type 3, which this is specifically made for the U.S., this small minority, less than 15% of the protesters, are actively attacking each other, police, damaging property, or looting, and there are firearms. Yeah, this is... I don't know if I included one for... Apparently I didn't. For over 25% of them are attacking police and each other, are actively damaging property and have firearms. Actually, that wouldn't be a protest. That would be more like a battle zone than be a war zone. Basically, that would be a bore zone. That would be more of a war. That obviously requires the National Guard, not riot police at that point. Yeah, that point, that isn't a protest anymore. What was I gonna say? That's a rebellion. But, I mean, if it's the consent of the governed, if the government's that bad, you have a valid point in taking over if it's, in the sense of justice. But that would be bad. But anyways, back on this. It basically requires everything. It's trying to do literally everything with this. I don't know if I really have a very good plan with this. I don't even think police would have a very good plan with this either. That's exactly why I don't think they dealt with, the, protests, like, in Michigan. They didn't do anything about them because I think they're afraid of doing anything because of the high-powered firearms there. That's one reason why I don't, I think that. Second, I think some of them agree with them. And third, well, that's, I don't know where I was going with the third, but, the first one, you're using high-powered firearms. How exactly are you supposed to quell them? You know, at the point, how exactly are you supposed to quell them? Well, I really don't think I had a very good contain, document, identify, snatch, and prepare for control. But I don't know what I meant. I really don't know what I meant by that. I'm sort of stumped in my own thing way there. So, and then I included the technology area. So, um, establish guidelines for the next generation of surveillance technologies like facial recognition technology that accounts for disproportionate impact and bias in their application. And here's another one. For all departments using tasers, use taser 7s, not the X26ers or whatever, the older models. Because the taser 7s, most tasers are used in close range. The tasers that Taser International have done before are not meant for that. They're meant for doing it long range, even though they're usually used at close range. And that is meant to people dying and stuff type of thing. So that would be a probably good idea to change it back to Taser 7s, the newest model, which goes back to close range use. So that's my list. So, yeah. Thank you for listening to me. Let me go over the things again before I go to bed at almost 3:30 in the morning. So, guidelines for protests, specific guidelines for them. Fair police union contracts, demilitarization, and for-profit policing, giving more training, require body cameras, allow people to film the police. It's another thing. You know, they should have community representation, independently investigate and prosecute, limit the use of force. Oh my, there's more than 10. Well, I should have known that. Community oversight. That's 11. And broken windows policing. Implement community policing and reform of special police services, aka the school to prison pipeline. There we go. 14 things. Thank you for listening to me with this, and see you next time.